Thank you.
Thanks, John.
I like being in Toronto. I especially like being in Toronto in late September, early October, leaving Dallas. Now, it's not because, for the usual reasons, you think of cool weather, it was really pleasant in Dallas. I sat outside on my balcony. I've got a high rise now, and so I sat on the balcony. I guess it was, what was it? Last Sunday night. Yeah, Sunday night, to watch the eclipse. Perfect night to sit out, 70 degrees, full moon, no star, you get the eclipse. So life's good, except that when I come up here, I don't have any allergies. That's why I like being in Toronto in October, because I have no allergies here. So I would like to figure out how to stay for about another 8 or 9 days, and then we'll have a frost in Texas, it'll all go away. So today we're going to do something a little bit different because I know this is going to be a shock to those of you who've been reading me for a long time, but I'm actually writing another book. I swear after I finish every book, I'll never do this, or at least not for a long time. But this is the book I've been threatening to write for about 10 years now. I'm going to write a book on what the world's going to look like in 20 years. And rather than cheating and only going to 2025, because I've waited 10 years, I'm actually still going to go out to 2035. And I'm thinking about the whole process of change and the rapidity of change, and then how it's going to affect our investing. And I think we're getting ready to do something, go into a period of time that I call the age of transformation. Because we're going to see the world change more in the next 20 years than we saw all of last century. It's going to compact. In fact, we'll probably see as much in the next 20 years as we've seen in the last 120. Going from no cars, horse and buggy, to where we are today. And we'll be that much further advanced in 20 years in most areas. Now, we'll still be humans. We won't be any prettier. Well, maybe some of us will be, because they're doing some cool things with biotech. But, so, some of the essentials, the basics won't change. But the world's going to be a vastly different place. And the way we invest and think is going to be a different place. So let's talk about how the world is going to change, and then we'll start talking about how to invest in it. We're going to go pretty fast here. I want you to look at the big guy, your Cro-Magnon man. And he's got in his hand, first thing you'd look at, he's got a spear. And I would tell you, no, that's just what it looks like. What it is a tool. And that's what this guy down here, the Neanderthals and all the other species that we beat out, that's what they didn't have. They didn't have tools. We're the tool species, and we learned to build tools. And we inherited, though, along with the old guys, that reptile brain that, that's fear and flight and, greed and chase. We grew up, we evolved on the African savanna, chasing antelopes and dodging lions, which is how many of us invest today, which doesn't work out all the time. Fortunately, Cro-Magnon man developed a frontal lobe that it taught us to think. And so we began to build more tools and to think about how to pull things together. We looked up into the stars, and our neurons advanced. And what I'm telling you is, if I'm right about the way the world's going, in the next 20 years, Homo sapiens, you and me, we're going to be outclassed. We're going to be outrun. But the good news is you can evolve. So what we need to do in order to succeed as investors is involve the homo rationalis. We have to become the species that thinks, that learns to control our fear and our greed, to control our emotions, and to think about how we invest, to think about how we go forward, and to use our tools, as ways to enhance ourselves. Now, the old mind, Homo sapiens, the way we evolved, we grew up thinking about linear time. We see things, we take the past 12 months or 2 years or whatever our experience is, and we project that in a linear time frame into the future. That's the way we think. And there's a reason we think that way, because that's pretty much the way things have been for 10,000 years. Things have changed a little bit more lately, but it's still pretty linear. There's a little upward cove. But that's what happens is when you get an exponential curve, you get to that elbow where the change happens so fast, that doubling again and that doubling again and that doubling again, pretty soon one of those doubles takes you to infinity and beyond. One of those doubles takes you from, and another double, so 10 years, 10 doublings, all of a sudden you're from 10 to a million. It just goes, and it happens, and you go from 1 million to 2. And we're getting ready to see that curve where it goes, it looks like Al Gore's hockey stick. And so what happens, we as humans, is we hit the curve, as we're doing it here. And I've got to figure out how to put this in my book so I make it visual. At every place along this curve, we project the last experience of that curve linearly, straight out. And it's not going out. It's going to go up. And then we take the last one, okay, and we keep shifting it. Well, you can't plan that way. Ray Kurzweil said when he was planning his first computers and synthesizers and so forth, that he would design and spec his work for where the computers would be in 3 years. He would write his software that there were no chips that could run it that fast when he designed it. But he said, they'll be there because that's what we do. And that's the way you have to design now. You've got to design for the chips that are going to be there in 5 years, not the ones you've got in your hand today. Not if you're going to be at the edge. So let's look at some of the curves that we've got. This is just the growth that we've seen since GDP, and it was basically it was a result of first industrial revolution and the second industrial revolution. And then we had the information age. First industrial revolution was started by the steam engine, a couple dozen entrepreneurs. When Isaac Watts invented the steam engine, he didn't invent it. There were people been playing around with the steam engine for 60 years. He was the first guy that really, sat down and worked with it. But there were maybe a dozen people in the entire continent who understood what to do with the steam engine. A dozen. We throw 1,000 at trivial problems today. Every bit the intellect of Isaac Watts. And then Remington came along, said, I'll use that to make my cannons, my steel mills. And he got one of those things and it was working. He says, who made this bore in this steam engine, in this piston? They're incompetent. That's what he said about Isaac Watts. Well, he happened to be the guy that made the best bores, could make the best cylinders in the world, because he made cannons. which gave the English an extra 40 or 50 yards on their same size cannons, which means they could set off further in their ships and shoot the French. Which is why we speak English today rather than French, unless you're Quebecois. But you know, seriously, if Remington had been a Frenchman, we would be speaking French because their cannons would have been better. He was their most protected secret. So he took Watt's engine, made a bore, and it immediately was 16 times more powerful. And then somebody else did something, and then somebody else did something. He said, well, if we put one of these. Isaac Newton said, if I see further, it's because I stand on the shoulders of giants. And we're saying, what giants did Isaac Newton stand on? He was like God. No. There were a lot of people before him that were part of that inverted pyramid. From the first guy that had that tool we call a spear. And today, as we go through this, what I want you to realize is the pyramid is now 100 million people wide. I was talking with somebody here earlier who has business in China. I was talking about how they realize they have to have 10 million entrepreneurs. That's the only way they're going to survive. They have to create new businesses. They have to stand on the shoulders of other people. Figure out how to do new things. That's what we do as humans. And those entrepreneurs, those businessmen, get to utilize all the tools that everybody else has made, so they have the ability to do more.